Just wonderful. That was Sam Evian live in session with his band, who he shall introduce in a moment. And for those of you who can't see, which is obviously everyone out there, Sam and Liam did an amazing transition there from Sam being on keyboards to Liam taking over on keyboards and Sam going to saxophone. It's a spectator sport, I can tell you. So, Sam, would you mind introducing your bandmates, please?
Yeah, Liam Kazar on guitar. Brian Betancourt on the bass, and Sean Mullins on drums.
Fabulous. Okay, and so you've just been doing some shows, but they've been your first shows in how long?
I did a tour in the U.S. in October, but this is kind of like the first of the new record, the first tours of that rollout. So yeah, we're kind of like testing out the record and getting it out on the stage. You know, it still feels new and fresh and bubbly.
Great, okay. And so on the other side of that, of course, was the pandemic.
Yes.
And can you tell me, how did that affect you kind of artistically? Because some people, you know, they found the environment obviously awful, but they also found the fact that they were just put into a situation where they could be very creative on their own.
Right.
How did it affect you?
It was a two-way street.
Right.
I mean, it kind of stifled my touring career. I meant to come over here for the last record, but I didn't get to. But I moved to the woods right before the pandemic hit. I'm up near Woodstock, New York, and I built a studio up there, and it's been a haven for many people at this point to come up and work, and it functioned that way during the pandemic. So I was quite lucky that I wasn't in the city at that time.
Sure. And you say the city, I mean, you famously moved to Brooklyn, and even though you were a little uneasy, supposedly, about the kind of environment in New York, you stayed there for a long time in Brooklyn.
Yeah, I did my time. I had 9 years, but I was on local news once on accident, and so I give myself a year of street cred because of that.
Okay, do you want to explain that?
I'm calling it a decade of New York City.
Right, okay.
I was working at the studio that's now closed called the Magic Shop, where Bowie cut his last record, and many others, Arcade Fire, Bjork. Like, it was an incredible space, and it was, you know, it fell victim to the classic New York City thing, which is rent goes up and artists leave. So they were in Tribeca, and so they shut the doors. I think it was 2016 when they shut the doors, and I was working on my first record there, and it was the last week of the studio being open, and local news caught wind of it, and they just stopped in, and I happened to be there just putzing around, so they put me on film.
I mean, so, for the reason of Bowie doing the last album there, the Black Star,
yeah,
I mean, it's got to be world famous and due a plaque on the wall, and then they go and shut it down and turn it into something else altogether.
It's absurd, but that's the way New York goes, you know. It's just like...
It's not just New York, mate, sadly, but there you go. So you mentioned you moved to the woods and talking about the Catskills and everything. And so I also read that a plunge, does that refer to the kind of swimming in the creek, which you decided to do? And is it right you took all the band in to do the same thing just before you started recording the album?
I did, yeah. I got a little obsessed with I guess it's a little health culty, which I try to avoid, but I got obsessed with cold plunging. But it's also a two-part thing. It's not necessarily just about the act of plunging, but I like the word plunge, and I like how it feels to think about, you know, just like immersing yourself in this fresh new stream, you know, and metaphorically speaking. But yeah, the stream goes around the studio, and it's become a bit of a habit to do a dunk before you start performing takes, and it's quite cold, so you just, you know,
exhilarating.
Yeah, and you get all these chemical benefits. You get adrenaline and all this other stuff that happens, which is pretty cool.
It's a great idea, actually, as you say. If you're feeling a little bit flat and uninspired, and then if you go in and give yourself a proper jolt, it's gonna make some difference, isn't it?
Yeah, I started getting into it, I think, because when Big Thief was recording with me, we made it a practice to go in every morning before coffee. So they were with me for a month. So every morning for an entire month, we were in that stream.
Right.
And there's a rule of 3. You have to do 3 dips, because the first one is very cold, and it's tempting to just run away. But no, you got to do 3.
Right, okay. Remind
Sets
me
you
never
up.
to record in your studio, Sam. No offence to anybody, but I don't think I could stand that. And also, the Beatles had a play in some of this.
Well, always, yeah. But I did see Get Back, and it answered so many questions and created so many questions at the same time, and it was so beautiful to see how they functioned in the studio once they got to Apple Studios. Once they left Twickenham, and Billy Preston shows up, and it's just this magic in the room. And I love Glenn Johns, the engineer on that record,
Yeah.
and the way he worked with George Martin on that, and the way they were swinging those mics around, and he was developing his style. He's going to go record with Led Zeppelin after that, and it's so fun to see like how he was recording Ringo and working on his mic techniques, which are pretty renowned at this point. But yeah, and then just the fact that like watching Paul pull it out of the ether, like and write a song just in the moment was just so fun to see. George, the consummate bandmate. Ringo, the consummate bandmate, always on time. George was having a bit of a moment, but we forgive him because he made All Things Must Pass like directly after. But the way they wrote and played together and created arrangements on the fly, and the way Billy worked himself in, was just a nice little reminder of how I want to do things.
Yeah, well, they changed things, didn't they, in such a remarkable way. But, I mentioned at the top of the show, me and three mates went on the Beatles tour.
Yeah.
So it's a yellow magical mystery tour bus all around the houses and Penny Lane and Strawberry Fields and past the Philharmonic pub and all these things. And if you've never done it and you're a Beatles nut, honestly, you really need to do it because it's a great afternoon out.
I would adore that.
Yeah, you need to do that, mate. Okay. And so, all right then. And I believe, just a little insider knowledge here, I believe that you're big on cooking.
True.
Right.
Absolutely. You talked to Matt earlier. Yeah.
I talked to Matt. I'll try and get some real dirt, but the only dirt he had on you was that you're great at cooking. That's not much dirt, is it, really?
Well, I will say it's built into the workflow at the studio. Because we're out in the middle of nowhere. So we all, like, artists come and stay with us. Me and my partner Hannah, we run it together with our dog, who's a rescue. And people come and stay. We cook together. We live together. We occupy the same space, and then you make a record that way. And it's like quite the formula, especially compared to the way you do it in the city, which is like everyone has to take a cab and you get food to go. So, you work up your practice, your recipe book of like recipes that work well for sessions. I call the opposite of that a session ender. When someone like takes a little too many carbs and it just slows them down or something. So we've.
Well, it sounds like you've nailed it. You've got a great environment and you're making great records there, not least your own, of course, Plunge, as we've mentioned already. And you're going to do 2 more songs with us back to back now. So, Sam Evian, what are you going to do for us?
We're going to do a song called Jacket. Yeah.
And then followed by?
Stay.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you.